In this movie, I'll show you how to kern and track letters to change the amount of horizontal spacing between characters of type. I've saved my progress as betterbyline.ai, and I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on my text here, and then I'll double-click on the word poem in order to switch to the type tool. And you can see that my text is too wide, of course, to fit inside the margin. I actually do want the comma to hang off. I want a little bit of what's known as hanging punctuation, but I don't want the N hanging out there like that. And you might figure, well, the solution is to change the type size. However, I've got some bigger fish to fry where this text is selected. Notice how randomly the characters seem to be spaced. We've got a ton of room between the P and the O here, and then the E and the M are pretty tight. The W and R are very loose. The R and the I are relatively tight together, as are the two T's. So what we need is more consistent character spacing. Now, here's how character spacing is measured, just so you know. Basically, every letter has not only the definition of the letter associated with it, but it has what's known as side bearing. So a little bit of space to the right and to the left of the character that is there to ensure that the characters aren't running into each other. But not all pairs of characters need to be treated the same. For example, I'll go ahead and click right about there and enter VO, so capital V, little o. Those two characters require just standard spacing, standard side-bearing spacing. They have no special kerning associated with them where this particular font is concerned. Now, kerning is a special spacing override that's associated with specific pairs of characters that are known as kerning pairs. So every font has a table of kerning pairs built into it, and VO is not one of them. Which is why if I press Control-T or Command-T on the Mac to bring up the character panel, and I take a look at my kerning value, it's 0, meaning that there's no special override. However, if I were to change that O to an A, you can see that the A is dipping into the V's territory there. And that's because if you click between the two, these guys are a kerning pair that's built into the Trajan Pro font definition. And as a result, they automatically get a kerning value of negative 55 thousandths of an M. That is to say, thousandths of the current type size, which is 63 points. So you would divide 63 by 1,000, which takes you down to 0.063 points, and then multiply that times negative 55. And while that particular equation is not important, what is that this value is always relative to the type size. So negative 55 is going to work regardless of what type size you're working with. At least that's the idea. And so I chose VA, by the way, because that is one of the classics, so classic that V and A are the icons for the kerning value. Now, you can override that if you want to. You could change it to anything you like. However, you're probably not going to select the value and change it because you have no idea what a better value would be. Instead, the more reasonable solution is to adjust the kerning from the keyboard. And you do that just as you do for leading. So I was telling you, Alt or Option along with the up and down arrows changes the leading, whereas Alt or Option along with the left or right arrows changes kerning. So if I pressed Alt left arrow, for example, a few times here, I would go ahead and nudge that A closer to the V. And I'm doing so without having either the V or A selected. You just set your blinking insertion marker between the two of them, and then you take advantage of that keyboard shortcut. If you want to move the letters farther apart, then you press Alt along with right arrow. This would be Option right arrow on the Mac. Now notice at this point, my kerning value happens to be negative 85. If I press Alt right arrow, or Option right arrow on the Mac, it's going to jump up to negative 80. The reason being that I changed my keyboard increment to 5 thousandths of an M a couple of movies back. If you want to move in larger increments, 5x increments, just like we did for leading, then you press Control-Alt along with those left or right arrow keys. That's Command-Option, left or right arrow on the Mac. So if I press Control-Alt left arrow, for example, I move those characters together 25 thousandths of an M. So I change that value from negative 80 to negative 105. If I press Control-Alt right arrow or Command-Option right arrow on the Mac, I move them apart back to negative 80. So again, a 25 thousandths of an M difference. All right, we don't really want the V and A in there, so let's get rid of them. What I want to do is adjust the pair kerning for the entire headline. So I'll triple click drag on that text to select both lines of type. So that's a 1, 2, 3, and then drag in order to select those lines. And now notice that we're seeing that the kerning value is set to auto. And what that means is that we're using the metrics that are built into the font. But if you click on this down pointing arrowhead, you'll see that you have a couple of other options available to you. You can use the metrics for the Roman type only, which is really only useful if you're using a combination of Roman characters along with, say, kanji or some other alphabet that doesn't require kerning. Or you can choose optical. And what optical does is it puts Illustrator in charge of the kerning process. Illustrator actually, on the fly, looks at the letters and makes special kerning decisions. And so in our case, it's going to make the text look a lot better. So I'll go ahead and switch to optical. We are no longer referencing the kerning pair table that's built into the font. Instead, Illustrator is overriding. And now we get special kerning values between just about every letter combo. Before, if I had clicked between the W and R, I would have seen 0 for the kerning value. Now I see -26. So Illustrator is making these intelligent decisions on the fly. I should tell you, however, if you're working with a standard font like this one, everything's going to be great, even if it's a semi-non-standard font like this one where we have solid uppercase characters. It's basically uppercase and small caps built into this font. There are no lowercase characters. Optical kerning still works great. When you don't want to use it is when you're working with a script font. Because when you're working with script fonts, they are specially hand-kerned to make sure that the characters exactly align with each other. And optical kerning will ruin it. Anyway, it works great for my text. Now I'm going to triple click in the first line up there in order to select it. And I want to move these characters together en masse using tracking. So next door to the kerning value is this tracking value, and it essentially is a kerning override that's applied to multiple characters at a time. So if you want to change the kerning, you click between two characters. If you want to change the tracking, you select multiple characters. And then the keyboard shortcut's the same. Notice right now the tracking value is 0. If I press Alt left arrow twice in a row, that would be Option left arrow twice in a row on a Mac, I'll change that value to -10. Again, thousandths of an M space. And that goes ahead and moves those characters closer together. All right, I'm going to press the escape key for a moment and then just go ahead and scroll my text up so I can better see it while the character panel's on screen. I like the fact that my comma is hanging outside of the margin. Again, I was telling you that's called hanging punctuation. That is a very common design choice, but I do want to move it in a little bit closer to the end. So I'll double click right there at that location and set the blinking insertion marker and switch back to my type tool. And notice the value right now is -41. I'm going to press Control Alt left arrow a couple of times in a row there. That would be Command Option left arrow on a Mac. That takes the value down to -91. And then I'll press Alt left arrow 2 more times. That's Option left arrow 2 more times on the Mac to take that value down to -101. And we end up with this beautifully spaced text. Again, I'll press the escape key in order to switch back to the black arrow tool and click off the text to deselect it. And that is how you kern and track text. Very important skill here inside Illustrator.